Hello everyone, welcome to The Brothers. So today we will learn the chapter 6 of science book, that is life processes, or the first chapter of biology for class 10th. So in this video we will learn till nutrition, not nutrition, till nutrition, and extra questions are given at the end of the video after we solve the in-text questions. What are life processes? Life processes generally are the things or the activities that a person performs to live a living, to live a life. Okay. So let's first get through with some definitions. Okay. So definitions. Alive. When do we call a person alive? A person is alive. A person is said to be alive if molecular movements are taking place inside the body of the individuals regularly. What are now some of the people are thinking, what are molecular movements? So molecular movements are the movements of the small or the tiny particles such as molecules of oxygen, O2, which we call Shakti in chemistry, move in and out of the cell. Okay. Naked eyes, normal eyes without any wearing such as lenses or sunglasses, etc. Okay, so now let us read the chapter. How do we tell the difference between what is alive and what is not? Alive. If we see a dog running or a cow chewing cud or a man shouting loudly on the street, we know that these things are living beings. What if the dog or a cow or the man were asleep? We will still think that they are alive because we will see the breathing in them, right? What about plants? How do we know that plants are alive or not? We see the green color, right? Uh, but what about the plants that have leaves of colors other than green? They grow over time, so we know that they are alive. Some will say. In other words, we tend to think of some sort of movement, either growth related or not, as common evidence for being alive. But a plant that is not visible growing is still alive, and some animals can breathe without visible movements. So, using visible movements as defining characteristics of life is not enough. Molecular movement over pretty small scales will be invisible to the naked eye. The naked eye which you talked about, right? Movements of molecules. For example, is the invisible molecular movement necessary for life? If we ask this question to professional biologists, they will say yes. In fact, viruses do not show that is partly why there is a controversy about whether they are truly alive or not. So the scientists generally say that there are a link between living and non-living things, right? Viruses do not work outside the body, but as soon as it enters any body, the body of an organism, it starts working and shows the symptoms of living things, right? Why are molecular movements needed for life? We have seen in earlier classes that living organisms are well organized structures. They can have tissues have cells have small components in them, and so on. Because of these effects of the environment, this organized, ordered nature of living structures is likely to keep breaking down over time. If the order breaks down, the organisms will no longer be alive. So, living creatures must keep repairing and maintaining their structures. Since all these structures are made up of molecules, they must move molecules around all the time. What are the maintenance processes in living organisms? Let us explore them, right? We will explore them with a little brain. Okay. So, before starting this, let us quickly summarize what we have learned here. We have learned here that molecular movements are important for any living because we cannot categorize a person that he is living or non-living on the basis of its physical movements, right? So, molecular movements are important for a living. If the structure of an organism breaks down, he will not be able to live. So, some repair processes have to be continued so that the organism stays alive. Okay, so and this is why we call virus is a link between living and non living. Okay, so okay, so let us define some terms. Life processes, the processes which are required to prevent the structure of the body from breaking down are known as life processes. Example: respiration, nutrition. Okay, nutrition is the process by which an organism takes food and utilizes it to get energy for growth, repair, maintenance, etc., and then excreting the waste material from the body. For single cell organisms, the organisms which have only a single cell that performs all the essential functions required by the body. For example, amoeba. Multicellular organisms, they are the organisms which contain millions and trillions of cells and have specialized tissues to perform the essential functions of the body. For example, human beings. So now let's read the NCERT. What are life processes? The maintenance function of living organisms must go even when they are not doing any particular event. Even when we are just sitting in the class, even if we are just asleep, the maintenance job has to go on. The process which together perform this maintenance jobs are called life processes, as we discussed above. Since these maintenance processes are needed to prevent damage and breakdown, energy is needed for them. This energy comes from outside the body of an individual, so there must be a process to transfer a source of energy from outside the body of the organism, which we call food, to the inside, a process which we commonly call nutrition. If the body size of the organism is to grow, additional raw material will also be needed from outside. Since life on Earth depends on carbon-based molecules, most of these food sources are based on carbon-based. Okay. Depending on the complexity of these carbon sources, different organisms can then use different kinds of nutritional processes. The outside sources of energy could be quite varied. Since the environment is not under the control of individual organisms, these sources of energy therefore need to be broken down or built up in the body and must finally be converted into a uniform source of energy that can be used for the various molecular movements needed for maintaining living structures, as well as to the kind of molecules the body needed to grow. For this, a series of chemical reactions in the body are necessary. Oxidation, reduction reactions are some of the most common chemical means to break down molecules. For this, many organisms use oxygen source from outside the body. The process of acquiring oxygen from outside the body and to use it in the process of breakdown of food sources or for cellular needs is what we call respiration. In the case of single-celled organisms, no specific organs for taking in food, exchange of gases, or removal of waste may be needed because the entire surface of the organism is in contact with the environment because it is single-celled. But what happens when the body size of an organism increases? The body design becomes more complex. In multicellular organisms, all the cells may not be in direct contact with the surrounding environment. Thus, simple diffusion will not meet the requirements of the cell. We have seen previously how in multicellular organisms, various body parts have specialized in the functions they perform. We are familiar with the idea of these specialized tissues and with their organizations in the body of the organism. It is therefore not surprising that the uptake of the food and of oxygen will also be the function of specialized tissues. However, this poses a problem since the food and oxygen are not taken up at one place in the body of the organisms, while all parts of the body need them. This situation creates a need for transportation system for carrying food and oxygen from one place to another in the body. When chemical reactions use the carbon source and the oxygen for energy generation, they create byproducts that are not only useless for the cells but could even be harmful. These waste byproducts are therefore needed to be removed from the body and discarded outside by a process called excretion. Again, if the basic rules for body design in multicellular organisms are followed, a special tissue for excretion will be developed, which means that the transportation system will need to transport waste away from the cells to this excreted tissue. Now let us do the in-text questions, as they are very important from the examination point of view. Again, so the first question is, why is diffusion insufficient to meet the oxygen requirements of multicellular organisms like humans? So as you have discussed above, that in multicellular organisms there are millions and trillions of cells, so diffusion cannot fulfill the requirement, as each and every cell requires oxygen regularly and at a good amount. Okay, so now let's figure it out, guys. Diffusion is insufficient to meet the oxygen requirements of multicellular organisms because diffusion is a slow process and the body of multicellular organisms require oxygen regularly and in huge amounts. Hence, oxygen is insufficient to meet the requirements of multicellular organisms. Okay, so let's do question number 2. What criteria do we use to decide whether something is alive or not? As you have discussed above, we use molecular movements as a criteria to decide whether something is alive or not, because we are not able to see the physical movements of some organisms, so while breathing or even while they are sleeping. So we use the criteria of molecular movement to decide whether something is alive or not. So let's figure it out. We use the criteria of molecular movements because in some organisms we cannot see the physical movements while they breathe. So now let's move to question number 3. What are the outside raw materials used for an organism? As you have discussed above, that we require oxygen and food as raw materials from outside so that we can perform all the life processes. It gives us energy to perform all the life processes and for the maintenance process and for growth. So now let's figure it out. The outside extra raw materials are required to provide the energy for life processes. The raw materials is also required for repairing and maintenance process in addition with growth. Okay, so now let's move to question number 4. What processes would you consider essential for maintaining life? As you have discussed that we use respiration, nutrition, excretion and transpiration as the basic life processes. So let's figure it out. The following processes are essential for maintaining life: nutrition, respiration, transportation and excretion. Nutrition, respiration, transportation and excretion are in points. Guys, it seems that there are no extra questions for this because it is a very simple topic. So now we will meet in the next video. Till then, bye. Please like and subscribe the channel.